So for today, we're going to be looking at triangles. Last week, we talked about polygons. Remember, the sides were straight, they were all connected, and for the smallest side of a polygon was three sides, and we call those triangles. So we're going to talk a little bit more about triangles today. To begin with, we're going to learn the names of them. We're going to classify them by angles and sides. So let me talk about the name of the angles. If an angle is between 0 and 90, so it's more than 0 but less than 90, that angle is going to be called acute. If an angle is equal to 90, we call those right angles. Now, if an angle is between 90 and 180, so it's more than 90 but less than 180, we're going to call those angles obtuse. So the name of an angle that is between 0 and 90, we call it acute. The name of an angle that is equal to 90, we call it right. And the name of an angle that is in between 90 and 180, we call that obtuse. Now, when it comes to triangles, we give the name to the triangle the name of the biggest angle. I'll come back to examples number 1 and 2. But first of all, let me talk about the name of the triangle based on the sides. If no equal sides, if the triangle has no equal sides, that means all the sides are different numbers. I'm going to call this scaling. If all the sides are different, I'm going to call it scaling. Now, if two sides happen to be equal, I'm going to call the triangle isosceles. Now, if all the three sides happen to be equal, I'm going to call this triangle equilateral. Now, looking at question number 1, I have to classify the triangle by its angles and sides. So let's take a look at the biggest angle first. I'm looking at the three angles. Now I'll focus on the biggest of the three. Remember, just looking at the corners. In this case, 108. Because the number 108 is in between 90 and 180, I'm going to call this triangle obtuse. Once again, I look at the biggest number. Now let me take a look at the sides. I notice that two sides are equal, right? 3.2 each of them. Because two sides are equal, I'm going to call this triangle isosceles. My homework, you guys know that the way you guys type things does matter, whether it marks it incorrect or correct. Make sure I'm asking for both words, angles and sides. So you should have two words. Do notice that the first name, in this case, the classifying by the angles, I'm putting capital letter on the first letter of the word. So in this case, I'm putting capital O. So the first word, you guys learned this in your English classes. When you write words, they call it sentence. When you write words, the first letter has to be capitalized. The first letter of the first word, not the second word. So do notice that isosceles, I have a lowercase I. Only capitalize the first letter of the first word. Okay, now let's take a look at question number 2. Let me classify a triangle by the angles. I'm going to take a look at the biggest number, in this case, 70. Once again, I'm looking at the corners only. All right, 70 is the biggest angle. Because 70 is in between 0 and 90, I'm going to call this an acute triangle. Now, looking at the sides, I notice that all the numbers are different. 2.4, 2.7, 2.9. All the numbers are different, so there are no equal sides. I'm going to call this triangle scaling. And once again, I only capitalize A from acute, not the S from scaling. And there is a space in between each word. Another thing we're going to learn on triangles is that you can try this at home. Just grab a regular triangle and cut the corners. So I'm just looking at the angles. We're going to call this a triangle angle sum. This is a rule that is called triangle angle sum. Basically, I'm adding the corners, I'm adding the angles of a triangle. So I'm just focused on the corners. I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to put them together like this. You guys can see it at the bottom. You guys can see my corners. Those are my three angles. Now, the interesting part of that is that the three angles are the angles of a line. If you look at it, it looks like half of a circle. This happens all the time. Like I said, you guys can try this at home. Just grab a triangle, cut the corners, put them together, and you guys will notice that it makes the angle of a line. Now, the angle of a line is equal to 180. So I'm just going to add everything. I'm going to add the three angles of a triangle, and I'm going to let this equal to 180. Let's take a look at example number 3. I have the three angles, and it says solve for x. So I'm just going to add the three angles. I have 7x plus 1 plus 76 plus 61. I'm adding everything. It doesn't matter which angle you start with. You just add everything. And this is going to equal to 180. Let me separate my sides through the equal side. On the left side, I'm going to condense it. I'm going to make it a little smaller. I'm going to make it easier to see. I noticed that the only term that has an x is 7x. I learned back in Algebra 1, right? You guys were supposed to learn in Algebra 1 how to add or subtract. They call it polynomials. When you're adding polynomials, you're just combining like terms. So all I'm looking on the left side, like terms. So 7x. Those are the only terms that have an x. Then the others, I'm going to add them. 1 plus 76 plus 61. Right? 1 plus 76 plus 61 happens to be 138. So I have plus 138. And this is equal to 180. Now I'm going to have the x by itself. So I see that x is on the left side. The plus 138, I'm going to move it to the other side as a minus 138. Don't forget to switch the sign. So on the left side, I have 7x. On the right side, I have 180 minus 138. 180 minus 138 happens to be 42. Now, the x is not quite by itself. There's a 7 right in front of it. So let me divide both sides by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1, so 1x. So it's not that the 7 disappeared. It actually became a 1. 7 divided by 7 is 1x. So I just write x. 42 divided by 7 is 6. So x is equal to 6. When you type in my work or my homework, do not type in x equals 6. All I'm asking is just for you to type 6. Now looking at question number 4. Once again, I'm going to add the angles. It doesn't matter which angle we start from. So I'm just going to say 7 plus 10x minus 3 plus 33. Your Algebra 1 teacher was supposed to tell you when you're adding polynomials, first, write them without parentheses. Some of you guys had parentheses when you guys were learning in Algebra 1. I'm just writing it as it is. I just copy everything with the signs that it had. And this is equal to 180. Let me separate my two sides through the equal sign. On the left side, I'm trying to combine like terms. So I take a look at the terms that have an x. In this case, it's only 10x. Then my numbers, I'm going to simplify 70 minus 3 plus 33. Do use a calculator if needed. 70 minus 3 plus 33 should give you 100. So I'm going to get plus 100. This is equal to 180. I want to leave the term with an x by itself, so that 100, I'm going to move it to the other side as a minus 100. Every time I move something from one side of the equal sign to the other side, I switch the sign. So that's why I wrote it as a minus. So I have 10x equals 180 minus 100 gives me 80. To get the x by itself, let me divide by the number in front of the x. So let me divide in this case by 10. 80 divided by 10 is 8. So when I type in my homework, I'm just going to type in